Dear God, we're honored to be gathered today to try to learn more about you and the events that are unfolding in the world around us. I ask that the Holy Spirit may be with myself and everyone else so that we can move together alongside you in companionship. I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Can I just confirm with the Zoom coordinator if the sound is okay?
Can you say something else?
If there are any problems, just message me.
Okay.
So we began our studies yesterday with an apology and defense from my part as to why my studies are the way they are. I mentioned the fact that as students of prophecy, we need to get comfortable with juggling multiple concepts at the same time. Because as a message grows and develops, each concept is related to the past. So we'll pick up from where we left off yesterday. But before we do that, someone has volunteered to do the summary for us. So please could you hand the mic to Ryan? Unmuted.
Hello.
So
Summary. Yes.
before I'll guide the summary.
Okay.
We discussed the structure to try and answer the two questions that were posed. What was that structure?
The structure from Daniel 11.
Before that,
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
so we have 3 points in time where things are going to unfold. And what about that 1, 2, 3? Just going to pause for a second. Carry on.
Okay. We say that in order to understand the future, which is number 3, we must go back to the past, which is number 1. but number 3 and number 1 are so too far apart that they have a language barrier between them. So number 2 acts like a translator that brings number 1 and 2 to communicate the same language.
And how does it do that?
Number 2 and number 3 are close together. They happen
We'll pause for our translators. Apologies to everyone on Zoom. There's a phrase that I've learned while being here. Well, I've known the phrase. But while Shemaine and Maurice were with us, it became our motto, which is Hakuna Matata. So with all the problems that we have with tech and thunderstorms and generators, Hakuna Matata. Okay.
okay.
So we have this structure of 1, 2, 3. 2 and 3 are close enough. So 2 can translate past events into a language 3 can understand. So what we wanted to understand is about democracy in relation to the Sunday law, as well as what event number 2 is that does that translation for us. So to begin that journey, we went to Daniel 11. Now, can you walk me through Daniel 11?
Okay. Daniel 11, we are introduced to a conversation between Gabriel and Daniel. And Gabriel points Daniel back into the past where, where Darius the Mede begins to rule.
Alongside whom?
Alongside Cyrus. Yes. And in Daniel 11, Gabriel makes it a point to Daniel that what I'm going to tell you following these kings has to do with the rise and fall of kings.
So we get to Xerxes, and we identified that that's a symbol that represents Trump. Without proving it, I said that Alexander is another symbol that represents Trump. So a question came up yesterday in my conversation with someone. which was, how can Trump be two different people? So I'm going to ask you that question. How do you get someone in present history be reflected by two different people in the past? Rutendo? Go. Try. Use an example.
Sorry, the problem that I have at the moment is I also wanted to add a complexity to the question.
Go ahead.
Because I know I'm the one who asked the question. What made it complex in my mind is it's not because they are two different people per se. But it's because there are two different kingdoms as well in the mix.
Okay, so now I have to answer the question. If we look at parables and parable methodology, what do we know about symbols? One symbol can have how many applications? Can have several applications. So can one application have several symbols? Yes. So an example I went through with Rutendo yesterday. Where I thought we were practicing for today. Turns out she wanted to stab me in the back on camera and add complexity. Was that we looked at Jesus. So if you have Jesus and he wants to explain some stuff about God, let's just say about himself, about Jesus. If Jesus wants to teach everyone around him that Jesus is a caring, loving, protecting person, what symbol is Jesus going to use? A shepherd. So a shepherd is going to point to Jesus. And then if Jesus wants to demonstrate that actually I'm a powerful, protective being that's going to defeat my enemies when they attack my people, what symbol is Jesus going to use? A lion. So two different symbols that want to make different points about the same person. One belongs to the kingdom of sheep, and one belongs to the kingdom of cats. So all you're doing is looking at that symbol, understanding the properties of that symbol and everything about it, application you make is going to be strict to the symbol, that kingdom, and you see that there's a shepherd for those sheep. Sorry, we've got technical issues. Okay? Is everything okay? Okay. So let's change sheep and lions for Xerxes as a symbol and Alexander the Great as a symbol. One is the kingdom of Medo-Persia, and one is the kingdom of Greece. Both are going to point to the same person, depending on the point you want to make. But when Jesus is wearing a lion's hat, it's all about lions, no longer about shepherds, and vice versa. Does that resolve your complexities?
I'm saying that I think I'll need another example. So
I'm going to take a page out of my teacher's book and say you can't go to examples because you need to understand the principle in and of itself. As soon as you start going to examples, it means you don't understand the principle. Or you end up mixing up the principle with the example. So at a principle level, are you okay?
yes, I think I'm thinking how I would come to that conclusion without making a mistake. Um,
It's context. Context is king. King is monarch. So if you don't want to make mistakes, be sure that you understand the context correctly. Okay.
yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
So where we left off yesterday was why Medo-Persia ended up falling under Xerxes. When Xerxes tried to rule the world. Another question I got was, why did I look at the systems of government and not anything else? As opposed to stuff like rebellion within a kingdom, for instance. This will be a quick answer, which I won't explore, but I'll give my opinion. Is that when any kingdom falls or succeeds, what you want to do is do a root cause analysis where everything else develops from. It's like if you go to the doctor, you describe your symptoms, which are a result of the underlying sickness. So if you do a good root cause analysis into Medo-Persia and Greece, you'll see that fundamentally their kingdoms are very different in terms of their government structures. Which led to those other failures that came thereafter. To the question, is that sufficient for you? Okay, so we're going to press on with our study with where we ended off yesterday. After that lengthy intro. What we ended off describing was that with our 1, 2, 3 structure, the thing that we want to understand is Alexander the Great in application, i.e., this ruler that wants to rule the world in the context of dictators, talking about the Sunday law. So when Elder Parminder did his studies last week, which book did we go to when we want to learn about the end of the world? So we start in Revelation 17. And what were the characteristics that we took without proving it? The theme of Revelation 17. Chichi?
The rise and fall of nations.
And what's another word for that?
Power struggle.
Power struggle. I've been asked several questions about this. So I'll leave the demonstration of that for our second study today. Of understanding why that would be considered a power struggle. But what's the other characteristic that we get from Revelation 17? What's that story about? Not Ryan. William? So William said the perfection of Satan's kingdom. How do we know that this is a story about the perfection of Satan's kingdom? Without saying, because Parminder said. Pardon, sorry, Regina? So Regina says everyone's here so I can answer those questions. But unfortunately, I don't do that. So we're going to answer the question. How do you know this is a story about the perfection of Satan's kingdom? So everyone just took what Paminda said and said, this is truth. Justina?
So if we go to number 1, we can see that in Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom in Daniel chapter 2 and 3, that
I'm going to stop you there. Sorry.
okay, I was going to say also in Revelation 17,
Okay. So stick to Revelation 17.
we can see that one kingdom is coming after the other. And if you move from the 6th to the 7th, I think there are different kingdoms, and it's getting worse as we go ahead.
Does it mention anything in Revelation 17 about a kingdom getting worse?
It's getting perfect, sorry, not worse.
Perfect. When I read those verses, I don't see any indication about that. Okay. Catherine? The answer is more straightforward than you might think. Or at least my version of the answer.
Okay, I have 2 ideas.
Which is the correct idea?
Well, the number 7 means perfect.
Okay, so we can forget about your second idea. We use symbols to try to understand what's going on there. So if in the creation story, God feels that on the 7th day, they've reached perfection, and you see this number 7 pop up around the Bible, you get the idea that it's in relation to the perfection of something. And so you can demonstrate that in Revelation 17 with successive kingdoms. So is this story about the perfection of Satan's kingdom about citizens or governments? So Chichi says governments. How do you know it's about governments and not people? Because both are mentioned in the chapter.
In Daniel chapter 3,
In 17, Revelation 17.
repeat your question.
How do you know that in Revelation 17, the focus is on governments and not people?
I don't know.
Regina?
I think verse 2. That's where we find our answer. It's talking about kings.
So Revelation 17 verse 2. What about these kings?
It's sharing. It's talking about the relations that these kings have with this woman. Yeah. but
To
I-
do what? They get into this relationship to achieve what? So Regina says to rule the people. So there's people involved, but the people are the target. As you go through the chapter, it talks about this relationship where the key to unlock everything is the kings. So it's a story about these kings. It's a story about the government and how it interacts with the woman and the people. So it's the governments that are important. So if we know that, and you just take it as fact that it's a power struggle, where can we go that's not Daniel 3 to understand the relationship between a woman a kingdom and a power struggle? What we want to try and unlock and see if we can find is a good number 2. So in our history, we said number 2 is 2021. And the question Shemin asked is, what event in 2021 gave us insight into what number 3 is going to look like? So we're looking for number 2. But in reality, don't get confused, we're looking for number 3. Because if you do this, number 2 becomes number 3. Because what you're looking for is an event in the past. If you're here in the present, before the number 2 of the number 3 you're looking for, remember, this is what you're trying to understand. You want to understand number 3. You're at number 2, and you want to know what event number 2 is. So if you're trying to understand what that is, you move back so that that number 2 becomes a number 3. Does that make sense? Okay. So now we're trying to understand this event. So where can we go for a number 1 to do that? There's many options. But as I said, this is a review of my studies. So keep your answers to the studies that I've done. I'll give you a clue. The event is not in the Bible. So where can we go? Where we see a power struggle, internal inner kingdom that is similar to what we're looking for. Liberty. Sorry. Go. Yeah, go. Okay, just go. I'll repeat what you say. So Liberty says he would opt for the rise of Hitler in Nazi Germany. Is it legal to do that? Going to something that's not in the Bible to use as a past event that points to the future. With regards to your methodology. Can you do that? Regina, you're shaking your head. Can you explain why?
Uh, I think first of all, what we need to do, we need to understand that issue in its original content first.
What issue?
Like what is looking at? Like in our case. Mm. You have to be in the. ah, let me not explain more. No. Let me give it to somebody else.
Okay, we'll go to Tato.
Can you please repeat your question?
Liberty took us to a historical event that's not in the Bible to use as a number one to try to understand number three, the future for us. As opposed to going to Daniel 3, he went to Nazi Germany. So I asked, is it legal to do that? Are you breaking William Miller's rules when you do that? Regina says yes with no reason why.
I'll say, no, you don't break William Miller's rules. It is illegal. It is legal for you to go to a past historical event that is not in the Bible.
Who says yes, it's illegal? Oh, yes, it's legal. Sorry. Who says no, it's not legal? With a reason. Okay, so most people say yes, it's legal. Okay, so why is it legal, Tato?
I will say that because you see what is happening and you are going backwards to see the same characteristics or similar characteristics from that history. It is interesting to see that even the some of the historians, they use the very same methodology. Especially as people who are saying Donald Trump, at the end of the world, he becomes a dictator. It's because they are seeing what is happening around them. Therefore, they go to Nazi Germany and then they see what Hitler did and how he became a dictator also in that history. I think that's what we do even in many other events or histories that we go back to point out that they are pointing to us. (1863) is not in the Bible.
I'll give Regina a chance to defend herself.
Okay, I stand to be corrected. I think one of the rules, William Miller's rule, says that let the Bible be its own expositor, like it explains itself. So if you know what that end of the world will look like, what the Bible is talking about, I think that is when you need, first of all, you first go to the Bible, and that's when you can go and look for a second witness.
So
That-
when we go to the history of Ipsus and Pyrrhus, I'd like a verse where it talks about Pyrrhus.
Okay, what I meant is before that, we can look at, there is no vase, but we understand that there will be this battle and things like that. You understand?
I want to go to Monica. With the big smile in the corner. Is it legal to go to the history of Germany and Nazi Germany to look for a number one?
I think so, yes.
Why?
It depends what, for me, it depends where we started. If we started in Revelation, then my thinking is we should also go back within the Bible. And if we started with external events, then we can look for external events in number one.
So how I understand it is how Ryan understands it. So Ryan, help us.
I think earlier in our studies, we looked at 1, 2, 3, and we looked at, yes. And we read from a passage in Selected Messages.
Do you remember the reference?
I think it's Selected Messages, book 2. Uh, 102, if I'm not mistaken. But in that verse, in that quote, we talked about how people were studying special prophecies, and they were standing in number 2, the present. And it was seen that the prophecies they were studying were historical events that were represented symbolically. So history is prophecy.
Have I phrased it correctly?
Yes,
Prophecy was seen to be a figurative delineation
of events leading down to the close of this earth's history.
So I've remixed it. So when that statement was written, what Ellen White meant is that there are events you see today that follow an order that fulfill prophecies that were given in the past. But just like Isaiah 46 verse 10, we reframe that. And instead of saying there was a prophecy about this in the past, we change a prophecy to there was an important event that will repeat at the end of the world. Solomon says, or whoever you attribute the book of Ecclesiastes to, that there's nothing new under the sun. Whether you're looking at events in the Bible or not in the Bible, when kingdoms rise and fall, there's nothing new about how they rise and fall. What we can learn from the Bible are principles, but that can be fulfilled throughout history. So just because it wasn't penned in the Bible doesn't mean that this repeating pattern stops. So going to an event in history, you should be of the belief that there's a wheel within wheel in that event. I don't know if you we'll leave it there. So yes, We've gone to Nazi Germany. And in my opinion, it's legal to do so. Because the wheel of time keeps on turning, whether you're in the Bible or not. So we're in Nazi Germany. And where do you see a power struggle in Nazi Germany? Liberty. That would, in my opinion, prefigure the Sunday law.
I don't know if I will address that. Let me just say what I'm thinking.
The floor is yours.
So I see two parts of a story when we consider Hitler. The first part is when Hitler tried to seize power by force. And he ended up in prison.
Let's start with when he gets to power. Because that's what number 3 is about.
Okay.
It's about a kingdom getting to power.
So Hitler reshaped the conservative party in Germany. He remade it in his own image. And took power with legal means. And after that became a dictator.
That's an important point. Is that Hitler gets to power because there's a certain party within that kingdom that opens the door for him. In 1933, he's crowned king. He's made chancellor. But an important point that Liberty said is that it was only after 1933 where he becomes a dictator. And that has a bearing on what we expect at the Sunday law. So because we've got 20 minutes left, I'll go back to where Liberty started. So here Hitler comes to power after a power struggle with Germany. Up until that point, historians call that Germany. But after that point, they refer to it as Nazi Germany. For a reason. Because there was a power struggle that was going on, that Hitler wins, and then he reshapes that government in his image. But it takes a period of time after he gets to power to achieve that. So where Liberty started was pointing to the agitation of his coronation. There were warning signs. The lights were blinking that Hitler is going to come to power. Because 10 years earlier, him alongside his party looked at the world around them looked at Germany and took the economic crisis that was going on as an opportunity to exploit the situation. And so he decides to conduct a coup. He tries to take over the government illegally. An illegal attempt that fails, and he's thrown in jail. It was called the Beer Hall incident. While he's in jail, he does some self-reflection. Notices that if I'm going to come to power, I should work with the system. And so 10 years later, he puts aside all that illegality, and now he's going to come to power through legal means. So when we're standing in 2021, the event should have been staring us in the face of how this person is going to come to power. And what happens in 2021? To answer Shemin. Hello, Shemin? Someone's going to answer the question for you. Catherine. Ah, no, we'll go there. Because Catherine heard all my answers when I was sleep talking.
So I see the January 6th event where to overthrow the government
lapha uTrump khona ezama ukubhozomela umbuso
that's taking power in an illegal manner,
ethatha umbuso ke ngendlela engekho emthethweni
and he failed.
So he starts off illegally,
uqala ngendlela engekho emthethweni,
and because we know history repeats, and Hitler is the story about a dictator, we should have known that the Sunday law is coming, where this person comes to power. So in 2024, that power struggle reaches its fruition. And the door is open for him to begin his work. So we've gone through my attempt of seeing how we can explain why January 6th was the agitation of the Sunday law. By going to a suitable number one to do that. So we've got 15 minutes. And with those 15 minutes, I want to kind of switch gears. There'll be a Q&A tomorrow. So if anything that we've discussed so far hasn't made sense, or if you have questions, then please bring them up then. But I'm so interested in this number 3 that I'm going to do what Regina told me to do in the first place. I'm going to go to inspired writings. Because I know that Ellen White knows something that I don't. But there's some clever people around Ellen White who explore what she says and give a bit more detail to things she's spoken about. Which author or pioneer am I going to? Take that back. He wasn't a pioneer, I don't think. So I keep hearing A.T. Jones. Remember, our conversation is number 3. Ellen White hints at what a good number 1 would be. And A.T. Jones unpackages that. What's our number 3? Sorry, our number 1. That talks about a power struggle. Someone go to Liberty.
I'm thinking of 1888 history.
I want a better one. That one's weak. The premier one that we should use to understand Babylon at the end of the world. Remember we said in Revelation 17, this 7th beast is a resurrection of the 5th. So what event in the 5th should point us to that event in the 7th? It's on our charts, and it's embedded in Adventist history. Sorry, Tina? Just say it.
538.
Tina says 538. This is a trap, so I'm telling you beforehand. What happens in 538 that would reflect the Sunday law? Elder Doreen. Why does Ellen White speak about this event in the context of the Sunday law? Why does Adventism hang their prophecy on that event? Remember, I'm trying to trap you.
I've probably fallen for the trap, but I think it's when the papacy rules. The papacy imposed Sunday.
So Doreen says that she's probably falling for the trap, as 538 talking about Sunday laws. So thank you for participating, because I laid the trap and you ate the cheese. Was there a Sunday law in 538? So the Sunday law that people often turn to was a church in an obscure location that makes Sunday observance mandatory. It's a church doing that work. Does that meet the criteria of church and state? No. Because the story of Revelation 17 is the story of a woman getting the state to do what it wants. So, if you're familiar with A.T. Jones' work, before we do that, Chichi, you had a question?
You just said in the story of Revelation chapter 17, the woman is using the state to get what it wants or what she wants.
Is that a question?
Yeah, because like when you say what it wants, you said like it's a state.
What the woman wants. Okay? There's a book that A.T. Jones wrote in 1898. I didn't know that when I